Welcome to Forgotten Myths. Get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Tonight, we're traveling east. Far east. To an archipelago of islands where mountains meet the sea. Where volcanoes sleep beneath shrines. Where the boundary between the living and the dead has never been entirely solid. Japan. You might think you know Japanese mythology. You've seen the anime. You've played the video games. You've heard of Amaterasu, the Sun Goddess. Maybe you've encountered yokai in some horror movie or manga. But the original myths are different. They're darker, stranger, more disturbing than anything you've seen adapted for modern entertainment. The gods of Japan didn't sit on thrones dispensing justice. They made mistakes. They committed acts of shocking violence. They were driven by jealousy, by rage, by grief so profound it transformed them into monsters. And the dead? The dead didn't go peacefully into some distant afterlife. They lingered. They rotted. They reached back into the world of the living with cold fingers and unfinished business. The Japanese understood something that other cultures tried to forget. Death isn't clean. Death isn't distant. Death is right here, just on the other side of a very thin door, and sometimes that door opens. Tonight, we're telling their stories, Izanami and Izanagi, the divine couple who created Japan itself, who loved each other so much that when death separated them, Izanagi descended to the underworld to bring his wife back. What he found there would haunt Japanese religion for thousands of years. Amaterasu, the Sun Goddess, the most important deity in the Shinto pantheon, the divine ancestor of the emperor himself, who was so traumatized by her brother's violence that she hid in a cave and plunged the entire world into darkness. And Yomi, the land of the dead, not a place of judgment or punishment, just death, rot, decay, a realm of shadows where the dead existed in their decomposing bodies, unable to return, unwilling to let go. These are the original myths, from the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, the oldest texts of Japanese religion, written down in the 8th century but containing stories far older. Before they were softened for shrines, before they were sanitized for tourists, before anyone decided to make them safe, the real stories of Japanese death. Let's begin. In the beginning, there was chaos. Not the chaos of violence or disorder, the chaos of formlessness, of potential that hadn't yet become anything. The Japanese called this primordial state a mixture of things. The cosmos was like an egg, some texts say. The lighter, purer elements hadn't yet separated from the heavier, darker ones. Everything was mixed together in a kind of cosmic soup. And then, slowly, separation began. The light elements rose. They became the heavens. Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. The heavy elements sank. They became something below, but not earth yet. Not solid ground. Just murky heaviness. A potential for land that hadn't actualized. Between them was nothing. A void. An emptiness where the world should be. And in the heavens, the first gods appeared. The earliest gods are barely described in the myths. They emerged spontaneously. They had no parents, no origin stories, no dramatic births. They simply were. They're called the Koto Amatsukami, the separate heavenly deities, 5 of them appearing one after another, existing for a while, then hiding themselves away. We don't know what hiding themselves means. The texts don't explain. Maybe they merged back into the cosmos. Maybe they retreated to some dimension beyond the myth. Maybe they simply became irrelevant to the story the Japanese wanted to tell. Because the story isn't really about them. It's about what came next. After the first 5, more gods appeared, generation after generation. Pairs of deities, usually male and female, emerging from the cosmic process. The last of these pairs was special, Izanagi no Mikoto. He who invites, Izanami no Mikoto. She who invites. Brother and sister, husband and wife, the creators of everything that would follow. The older gods looked down at the void between heaven and the murky depths below. Something should be there. Land, earth, a world where things could exist. But none of the older gods seemed inclined to create it. They had appeared, they had existed, they had hidden themselves. Creation wasn't their concern. So they turned to the youngest generation, Izanagi and Izanami. Make the land solid, the older gods commanded. Create what is below. They gave the young couple a gift, a weapon, a tool, the Amano Nuboko, the heavenly jeweled spear. It was a sacred object, divine, decorated with precious stones, capable of shaping reality itself. Izanagi and Izanami took the spear. They walked to the Ame no Ukihashi, the floating bridge of heaven. A rainbow, some say, or a pathway of clouds, something that connected the heavens to the void below. They stood on this bridge. They looked down at the formless murk, and they began to create. Izanagi thrust the spear down into the primordial brine. He stirred, round and round, churning the cosmic mud, mixing the heavy elements, creating motion where there had been only stillness. The sound it made was kaworo kaworo, a thick, gurgling, churning sound, the sound of creation itself. When Izanagi pulled the spear back up, brine dripped from its tip, heavy, salty drops. They fell back down toward the murk below, and where they fell, they piled up. They accumulated. They solidified. An island formed, Onagoroshima, the self-curdling island, the first land in existence. It was small, just a single island in an infinite sea of chaos. But it was solid. It was real. It was a place where the gods could stand. Izanagi and Izanami descended from the floating bridge of heaven. They set foot on the first land, and they looked at each other. They were alone, the only two beings on the only land in existence. Brother and sister, yes, but also destined to be more than that. They needed to create, to populate this new world, to bring forth land and gods and everything that would exist. But how? They looked at each other's bodies. Izanagi noticed something. My body is formed and complete, he said, but there is one part that is formed to excess. Izanami looked at herself. My body is formed and complete, she said, but there is one part that is not fully formed. There is an insufficiency. Izanagi understood. If we were to join my excess to your insufficiency, we could create new lands and new beings. Izanami agreed, but they needed a ritual, a ceremony, something to sanctify the union. They built a pillar, the Ame no Mihashira, the heavenly August pillar, a great column at the center of Onagoroshima. They also built a hall, the Yahirodono, the hall of 8 fathoms, a palace for their wedding. The ritual was simple. They would walk around the pillar in opposite directions. When they met on the other side, they would speak words of love. And then they would unite. Izanagi walked to the left. Izanami walked to the right. They circled the pillar. They met on the other side. And Izanami spoke first. What a lovely young man, She exclaimed. Then Izanagi spoke. What a lovely young woman. They joined together. They made love, and Izanami became pregnant. But something was wrong. When Izanami gave birth, the child was not right. It had no bones, no limbs that worked properly. It was soft and shapeless, like a leech. It couldn't stand. It couldn't walk. It couldn't even hold its own form together. They named it Hiruko. Leech child. Imagine the moment, the first divine parents, the first divine birth, the anticipation, the joy, and then seeing what emerged, a boneless thing, a god that wasn't a god, something that lived but couldn't truly live. Izanagi and Izanami were horrified. They were disgusted. They were ashamed. This was supposed to be a divine child, a kami, the first of many beings they would create together, the first in a lineage of gods that would populate heaven and earth. Instead, it was this thing. They couldn't keep it. They couldn't raise it. What would they do with a boneless god? How would they explain it to the other deities? How would this malformed creature take its place in the cosmic order? They made a terrible decision. They built a boat, a small vessel made of reeds, fragile, barely seaworthy. They placed Hiruko inside, and they pushed the boat out to sea. They stood on the shore of Onogoroshima, the island they had just created, and they watched the currents carry their firstborn child away. Out into the primordial waters, into the chaos that still surrounded their tiny island of order, abandoned, cast off, left to die. The Kojiki, the oldest Japanese historical text, mentions this in just a few lines. It doesn't elaborate. It doesn't explain. It simply states what happened and moves on. But the image lingers. The first act of creation by the founding gods of Japan was to abandon their malformed child to the ocean. There's a footnote to this story, a later tradition. Some versions say that Hiruko didn't die, that the leech child drifted across the sea, eventually washing ashore in the region of Setsu, near modern-day Osaka. There, the local people found the strange being. They took pity on it. They raised it, and Hiruko grew. Despite having no bones at birth, it developed. It transformed. It became a god after all. Ebisu, one of the 7 lucky gods of Japan, the god of fishermen and merchants, a deity of good fortune and fair dealing. The abandoned leech child, becoming one of the most beloved gods in Japanese folk religion. If this version is true, it means Izanagi and Izanami were wrong to abandon their son. It means their first instinct, to discard what seemed defective, was a mistake. It means that even flawed beginnings can lead to blessed endings. But that's a later story, a folk tradition that grew up centuries after the original myths were written down. In the Kojiki, Haruko simply vanishes, cast out to sea, never mentioned again. The gods moved on to their next attempt. Their second child was no better. Awashima, the faint island. It was supposed to be land, a new island to add to Onogoroshima. But it was wrong, too. Unstable. Not solid. It didn't count among the islands they were supposed to create. 2 failures. 2 malformed creations. Izanagi and Izanami didn't understand. They had done everything correctly, hadn't they? They had built the pillar, performed the ritual, spoken the words of love. What had gone wrong? They ascended back to heaven. They consulted the older gods. The answer came through divination, through reading the cracks in burned bones. The woman spoke first. This was not proper. The man should have spoken first. Return to the island. Perform the ritual again. This time, Do it correctly. Izanagi and Izanami returned to Onogoroshima. They approached the heavenly pillar again. They prepared to repeat the ceremony. This time, they were careful. Izanagi walked to the left. Izanami walked to the right. They circled the pillar. They met on the other side, and Izanagi spoke first. "What a lovely young woman," then Izanami responded. "What a lovely young man." Proper order. The man before the woman. The way things should be. They united again, and this time it worked. Izanami began to give birth. And what she gave birth to was extraordinary. Not children in the human sense. Islands. She bore Awaji, the island that sits between Honshu and Shikoku. She bore Shikoku itself, the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands. She bore the Oki Islands, scattered in the Sea of Japan. She bore Kyushu, the southernmost main island. She bore Iki and Tsushima, the islands between Japan and Korea. She bore Sado, the island of exile in later Japanese history. She bore Honshu, the largest island, the heart of Japan, 8 islands, the great 8 islands, the core of Japan itself. This is why Japan was called Oyashima no Kuni, the land of the 8 great islands, because Izanami gave birth to it, because the Japanese archipelago emerged from the body of a goddess. But she wasn't done. After the islands came more gods. She gave birth to the god of the sea. She gave birth to the god of harbors. She gave birth to the god of wind. She gave birth to the god of trees. She gave birth to the god of mountains. She gave birth to the god of fields. God after god. Deity after deity. The entire Shinto pantheon emerging from Izanami's divine womb. Some she bore easily, some with difficulty. Each one took something from her. But she kept going. She kept creating. She was the mother of Japan, the mother of the gods, the great creatrix who brought everything into existence. And then she gave birth to fire. His name was Kagutsuchi, the god of fire. When he emerged from Izanami's body, he burned her. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. He literally burned her. His divine flames scorched her birth canal, seared her flesh, inflicted wounds that even a goddess couldn't survive. Izanami collapsed. She lay on the ground, dying, burnt from the inside. The mother of everything, destroyed by her own child. Even as she died, she continued to create. From her vomit came the gods of metal and clay. From her feces came the god of earth. From her urine came the goddess of water and the goddess of growth. Creation and death happening simultaneously. Life emerging from a dying body. And then Izanami died. Izanagi was devastated. He crawled to where his wife lay. He held her body. He wept. "Oh, my beloved spouse," he cried. "I would give all the children we have created just to have you back. I would trade everything for you." His tears fell on the ground. Where they landed, a goddess emerged. Nakisawame, the weeping woman, a deity born from grief itself. But tears wouldn't bring Izanami back, and Izanagi's grief curdled into something else. Rage. Izanagi looked at his son, Kagutsuchi, the fire god, the one who had killed Izanami. Just a baby, really. A home, newborn deity who hadn't meant to hurt anyone. He was fire. Fire burns. That was his nature. It didn't matter. Izanagi drew his sword, the Ame no Ohabari, the heavenly extending blade, 10 handspans long, a weapon of divine power. And he cut off his son's head. He didn't stop there. He cut the body into pieces. 8 pieces, some versions say. Each piece became a god. The mountain gods, the thunder gods, gods of stone and fire and destruction. Even in death, even murdered by his own father, Kagutsuchi continued to generate divinity, and from the blood that dripped from Izanagi's sword, more gods emerged. Where it splattered on rocks, warrior gods were born. Where it pooled on the ground, dragon gods arose. Violence and creation, murder and birth, the Shinto cosmos, built on a foundation of grief and rage. But killing his son didn't satisfy Izanagi. It didn't bring Izanami back. She was still dead. She had descended to Yomi, the land of the dead, the realm beneath the earth where all who died must go. Izanagi made a decision. He would go after her. He would descend to Yomi. He would find his wife. He would bring her back to the world of the living. No one had ever done this before. No one had ever returned from Yomi. The dead stayed dead. That was the law. But Izanagi didn't care about the law. He loved Izanami, and he would tear open the gates of death itself to get her back. Yomi no Kuni, the land of Yomi, the land of darkness, the land of the dead. It lay beneath the earth, below the islands that Izanami had created, a vast realm of shadow and silence where the light of the sun never reached. To get there, Izanagi had to travel down through caves and tunnels, down through passages in the earth, down into darkness. The journey took time. How long, the myths don't say. Long enough for Izanami to have settled into her new existence. Long enough for changes to have occurred. Finally, Izanagi reached the entrance, a great gate, the boundary between the living world and the dead. He passed through. Inside everything was dark, not the darkness of night, which still has stars and moon, a deeper darkness, an absolute absence of light. Izanagi called out, "Izanami, my beloved, I have come for you." His voice echoed through the empty halls. "The lands we were creating together are not yet finished. You must return with me. We have more work to do, more children to create. Please, come back." Silence. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, a voice. Izanami's voice. "My beloved husband, I am so sorry. You have come too late." "Too late?" Izanagi's heart clenched. "What do you mean?" "I have already eaten the food of Yomi," Izanami said. "The food of the dead. Once you eat it, you cannot leave. I am bound here now. The food of the dead, a concept that appears in mythologies around the world. Persephone and her pomegranate seeds, the fairy food that traps mortals in other realms. Once you consume what belongs to death, you belong to death. Izanagi refused to accept this. "There must be a way. Please, Izanami, try. For me, for everything we built together." A pause. The darkness seemed to shift. "I will speak to the gods of Yomi," Izanami finally said. "I will ask them to release me. Perhaps they will show mercy. Perhaps there is a loophole." "Yes, do that. I'll wait." "But husband, you must promise me something. Anything. Do not look at me." Izanagi hesitated. "What?" "Do not try to see me. Do not bring light into this place. Wait here, in the darkness, and do not look at me until I return with an answer. Promise me this." It was a strange request, but Izanagi was desperate. "I promise." He heard movement, footsteps receding into the depths of Yomi, his wife going to negotiate for her own release, and Izanagi was alone in the dark. He waited. How long? The myths don't agree. Some versions say a few hours, some say days. Long enough for patience to wear, thin, long enough for worry to grow. Why was it taking so long? Why hadn't she returned? What was happening in the depths of Yomi? And why? This question began to gnaw at him. Why had she told him not to look at her? The more he thought about it, the more suspicious he became. She had eaten the food of the dead. She was bound to Yomi. But what did that mean exactly? What had Yomi done to her? Why didn't she want him to see? Izanagi reached up to his hair. He wore it bound up, as was the custom. And in his hair was a comb, a wooden comb with many teeth. He broke off one of the end teeth. He lit it on fire. A small flame, barely enough to see by, but in the absolute darkness of Yomi, it blazed like the sun. And in that flickering light, Izanagi saw his wife. She was rotting. Izanami's body was decomposing. Her flesh was falling away from her bones. Maggots writhed in her eye sockets. Worms crawled through her decaying muscles. The smell hit him. The stench of death, of putrefaction, of a body that had been dead for how long? How much time had passed while he waited in the darkness? Her skin was mottled, black and green and yellow, the colors of decay. Her lips had pulled back from her teeth in a rictus grin. Her nose had collapsed into her skull. This was not his wife. This was a corpse. This was what death looked like, stripped of all comfort and euphemism. And she was not alone. On her body, around her body, attached to her body, thunder gods, 8 of them, the Yakuza no Ikazuchi no Kami, born from her decay, residing in her rot. One clung to her head, O Ikazuchi, the great thunder. One clung to her breast, O no Ikazuchi, fire thunder. One clung to her belly, Kuro Ikazuchi, black thunder. One clung to her genitals, Saku Ikazuchi, splitting thunder. One clung to her left hand, Waki Ikazuchi, young thunder. One clung to her right hand, Tsuchi Ikazuchi, earth thunder. One clung to her left foot, Nari Ikazuchi, sounding thunder. One clung to her right foot, Fushi Ikazuchi, crouching thunder. 8 thunder gods, feeding on her decay, growing from her death. They were not parasites. They were her children now, her offspring in death, as she had once borne children in life. The thunder gods of Yomi, born from the corpse of the creator goddess. Izanagi screamed. The flame in his hand wavered. The light danced crazily across the walls of Yomi, casting shadows that seemed to move, to reach, to grasp. He had come to rescue his wife. He had found a monster. Izanami's eyes opened. Not eyes, empty sockets crawling with maggots, but something looked out of them. Some intelligence, some will, some rage. You! Her voice was different now, thick, wet, the voice of something speaking through a throat full of decay. You have shamed me. Izanagi stumbled backward. The flame in his hand shook. I told you not to look. I told you to wait. I was negotiating with the gods of Yomi. I was bargaining for my release. I almost had permission to return. Izanami, Silence. The thunder gods stirred. Lightning crackled across her ruined body. The 8 deities that clung to her corpse began to glow with electrical fury. I begged you one simple request. Do not look at me. Wait in the darkness. Trust me. I did wait. I waited so long. Not long enough. You couldn't trust me for one more moment. You had to see. You had to know. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Something like smoke rose from her rotting form. And now you have seen. You have witnessed my shame. You have looked upon what I have become. She began to rise, or something rose. The rotting thing that had been Izanami, pushing itself up from the ground of Yomi. The thunder gods clinging to her body crackled and sparked. For this, husband, you will pay. She reached toward him with decomposing hands, fingers that were half bone, half rotting flesh, nails that had grown long and curved in death. Izanagi ran. He fled through the darkness of Yomi. Behind him, Izanami screamed orders. After him, bring him back. He must not escape. The Shikome came first, the ugly women of Yomi, female demons, hags, creatures of the underworld sent to capture the fleeing god. Izanagi could hear them behind him, their feet pounding the ground, their breathing, wet and rattling, getting closer. He reached up to his head. He pulled off his headdress, his black vine crown. He threw it behind him. Where it landed, grapes sprouted, wild grapes bursting from the ground. The Shikome stopped. They were hungry. They fell on the grapes, devouring them, fighting each other for the food. Izanagi gained ground, but not enough. The Shikome finished the grapes and resumed the chase. He reached into his hair again. He pulled out his comb, the same comb he had used to make light. He threw it behind him. Where it landed, bamboo shoots sprouted, tender bamboo pushing up from the earth. The Shikome fell on them, tearing at the bamboo, eating ravenously. Izanagi ran on, but now Izanami had sent more than the Shikome. The 8 thunder gods, the deities that had grown from her corpse. They came roaring through the darkness, lightning crackling around them, thunder shaking the tunnels of Yomi. And behind them, an army, the Yomotsu Shikome, 1,500 warriors of Yomi, the soldiers of death, armed and armored and hunting the god who had dared to violate their realm. Izanagi's tricks wouldn't stop an army. He drew his sword, the same blade he had used to kill Kagutsuchi. He swung it behind him as he ran, slashing at anything that got too close. But he couldn't fight 1,500 warriors. He could only run. Light ahead, the faintest glow, the mouth of the cave, the entrance to Yomi, the border between death and life. Izanagi sprinted toward it. The army was right behind him. He could feel their breath on his neck, their hands grasping at his robes. He burst out of the cave, into sunlight, into the living world, into air that didn't stink of decay. But he wasn't safe yet. Izanami herself was coming. He could hear her voice shrieking through the tunnel. She wasn't going to let him go. Izanagi looked around. He saw a boulder, massive, heavy enough that even a god would struggle to move it. He grabbed it. He rolled it. He shoved it into the mouth of the cave. The Chibiki no Iwa, the road-pulling rock. It sealed the entrance to Yomi. From the other side, he heard Izanami arrive. He heard her hands slam against the stone. Izanagi? They faced each other through the rock. He could hear her breathing, ragged, wet, the breathing of a corpse. "You have humiliated me," Izanami said. "You have seen my shame. You have run from me. You have sealed me in this place of death." "Izanami, I am no longer your wife. You are no longer my husband. I curse you, Izanagi. I curse the world you are returning to." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Every day, I will kill 1,000 of the people in your land. Every single day. 1,000 deaths. This is my vengeance. This is what your shame has earned." Izanagi was silent for a moment. Then he responded, "If you kill 1,000 every day, then I will cause 1,500 to be born. For every death you bring, I will bring more life. You will never win. The living will always outnumber the dead. This is why the myths say more people are born each day than die. This is why humanity continues to grow. Because of this exchange between the divorced gods at the border of Yomi, life and death locked in eternal competition, a marriage that ended in cosmic spite. From this moment, Izanami declared, I am Yomotsu Okami, the great god of Yomi. the ruler of the dead. I will never return to your world, and you will never enter mine again. And I, Izanagi said, will never come back here. I reject you. I reject Yomi. I reject everything that belongs to death. The first divorce in Japanese mythology. The creators of Japan separated forever by a single rock. Izanami descended back into darkness. Izanagi walked away into the light. Neither of them ever saw the other again, but Izanagi was contaminated. He had been to Yomi. He had breathed the air of death. He had walked in the realm of the dead. He had touched. He had seen. He was polluted, impure, covered in the taint of the underworld. This is a concept that runs throughout Japanese religion. Kagar, impurity, pollution, the contamination that comes from contact with death, blood, disease, or anything that disrupts the proper order of things. Kagare wasn't sin. It wasn't moral failing. It was more like a spiritual dirt, a stain that accumulated and had to be cleaned away. And Izanagi had accumulated the ultimate Kagare. He had been to the realm of death itself. He couldn't return to the heavens like this. He couldn't rejoin the other gods. He couldn't continue creating. The pollution of Yomi would taint everything he touched. He needed to cleanse himself. He traveled to a river in Kyushu, the Tachibana River near the sea, a place where fresh water met salt water, a liminal zone, perfect for transformation, the border between two kinds of water, just as he had been to the border between life and death. He stood on the bank and he began to strip. Every piece of clothing he removed became a god. His staff, the walking stick he had carried to Yomi and back, became Tsukitatsu Funato no Kami, a deity of roads and crossings. His belt became Michi no Naga Chiha no Kami, a god of long roads. His bag became Toki Hakashi no Kami, a god of time. His clothes became Wazurai no Ushi no Kami, a god of misfortune, the bad luck he was shedding along with his garments. His pants became Chimata no Kami, another road god. His hat became Akigui no Ushi no Kami, a god of eating. His left-hand bracelet became Oki Zakaru no Kami. His right-hand bracelet became Okitsu Nagisa Biko no Kami, 12 deities born from the garments he had worn to Yomi. 12 gods created from what he was discarding. Even the pollution of the underworld, even the clothes that had touched death, even these became divine. In Shinto, everything can be a god. Everything has the potential for divinity, even the discarded clothes of a polluted deity. Then, naked, Izanagi entered the water. He submerged himself in the river where it met the sea. He scrubbed, he washed, he worked at the pollution like a man trying to clean off tar or oil. He scraped at his skin. He dunked his head beneath the surface. And as he washed, more gods emerged. From the pollution itself, from the filth of Yomi that came off his body, malevolent deities were born. Yasomaga Tsuhi no Kami, the 80 evils god, a deity of all the misfortunes that plague humanity. Omaga Tsuhi no Kami, the great evils god, the embodiment of calamity itself, the impurity of Yomi given divine form, the contamination of the underworld, becoming gods of disaster. But for each malevolent god, a benevolent god emerged to counter it. Kamu na Obi no Kami, a god of divine rectification. O na Obi no Kami, a god of great rectification. Izunome no Kami, a goddess of purification, balance. For every evil deity born from the pollution, a good deity born to oppose it. The universe maintains its equilibrium. Izanagi washed deeper. He washed more thoroughly. He found that the depth of the water mattered. When he washed in the deep water, different gods emerged. Sokotsu Watatsu Minokami, a god of the sea bottom. Soko Zutsuo no Mikoto, another deity of the depths. When he washed in the middle water, different gods appeared. Nakatsu Watatsu Minokami, a god of the middle waters. Nakazutsuo no Mikoto, a deity of the sea's center. When he washed in the shallow water, near the surface, more gods came forth. Uwatsu Watatsu Minokami, a god of the surface. Uwa Zutsuo no Mikoto, a deity of the upper waters. 3 levels of the sea, each producing its own divinities. The ocean becoming populated with gods, layer by layer, and then came the most important moment of all. Izanagi washed his face. He washed his left eye, and from it emerged Amaterasu o Mikami, the great august kami who shines in heaven, the Sun Goddess. She came out shining, radiant, light incarnate, the antithesis of everything Yomi represented. Izanagi had been to the darkest place in existence, and from washing away that darkness, light itself was born. He washed his right eye, and from it emerged Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, the moon god, ruler of the night, silver to Amaterasu's gold. The moon is the light that shines in darkness, the illumination that exists even when the sun is gone. Appropriate that he came from the other eye, a counterpart, a balance, another kind of light. He washed his nose, and from it emerged Susanoo no Mikoto, the storm god. The wild one, chaos and destruction personified. Why the nose? The Kojiki doesn't explain, but noses are associated with breath, with wind, with the fierce exhalation of life. Susanoo was fierce, Susanoo was stormy, Susanoo was the violent exhale of a god finally free of the underworld. Izanagi looked at these 3 children. He had created many gods, dozens of them. The islands of Japan, the mountains, the seas, the thunder, the wind. He had populated the cosmos with divinity. But these 3 were different. He wept with joy. I have produced child after child, he said, and now at the end I have obtained 3 noble children. Noble, special, supreme. He took the necklace from his own neck, the string of jewels he had worn since before time. He placed it over Amaterasu's head. You shall rule Takamagahara, he told her, the high plane of heaven. You shall be queen of the gods. He assigned Tsukuyomi to the night, the realm of darkness where the moon held sway. He assigned Susanoo to the sea, the vast oceans, the storms and waves. These were the 3 noble children, the Mahashira no Uzunomiko, the most important gods in the Shinto pantheon, and they were born from a father washing off death. Then Izanagi retired. His work was done. Japan was created. The gods were born. The cosmic order was established. The boundary between life and death was sealed with a boulder that would never move. He withdrew from the active mythology. Some versions say he built a palace of silence and lived there forever, contemplating what he had experienced. Some say he became one with the kami, that he dissolved back into the divine essence that permeates all things. Some say he ascended to the heavens and took a place among the high gods, watching but no longer acting. The Kojiki simply says he hid himself, like the primordial gods before him. His story was over, the creator of Japan fading away, leaving his children to inherit the world, and the mess he and Izanami had made, Amaterasu Omikami, the great august kami who shines in heaven, the sun goddess, the supreme deity of Shinto, the divine ancestor of the imperial family, the most important god in Japanese religion. She was born from Izanagi's left eye as he washed away the pollution of Yomi. She emerged fully formed, radiant, perfect. The antithesis of everything Yomi represented. Light, purity, life. Izanagi gave her the heavens to rule. He presented her with his sacred necklace, the Yasakani no Magatama, the string of curved jewels that would become one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan. You are the supreme one, he told her. All other gods will defer to you. Rule wisely. Amaterasu accepted the charge. She ascended to Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. She took her place as queen of the gods. And for a while, everything was good. Amaterasu was a diligent goddess. She oversaw the weaving of the gods' clothes. The divine garments that the deities wore were produced in special weaving halls, and Amaterasu supervised this sacred work. She tended the rice paddies of heaven. Yes, even in paradise, there were rice paddies. Agriculture was sacred. Amaterasu worked alongside the lesser gods, ensuring the heavenly harvests were abundant. She maintained order, she settled disputes. She embodied the proper harmony of things being as they should be. She was the perfect ruler. But she had a brother, Susanoo no Mikoto, the storm god, the wild one, born from Izanagi's nose as he washed away the impurity of death. He was given the sea to rule, the vast ocean, the storms and waves. It should have been enough. But Susanoo wasn't satisfied. He wept, constantly, loudly. His crying was so intense that it caused rivers to dry up and mountains to wither. His tantrums brought chaos to the world. Izanagi grew irritated. Why do you cry? I gave you the sea. What more do you want? I want to see my mother, Susanoo wailed. I want to go to Yomi. I want to be with Izanami. Even Izanagi, who had been to Yomi, who had seen what Izanami had become, was shocked. You want to go to the land of the dead? You would abandon your domain, your responsibilities, everything I gave you, for the underworld? Yes? Izanagi's patience broke. Then go. Leave my sight. You are banished. Go to Yomi if that's what you want, but never return. Susanoo was expelled, cast out, exiled from the heavens, but before he left for Yomi, he decided to visit his sister, to say goodbye, or so he claimed. Amaterasu heard that Susanoo was coming. She was suspicious. She knew her brother's nature, violent, chaotic, unpredictable. He hadn't come to the heavens since their birth. Why now? She suspected he was coming to take her kingdom, to seize the high plane of heaven for himself, to overthrow her rule. She prepared for war. She tied her hair up in warrior fashion. She slung a quiver of 1,000 arrows on her back. She took up her bow. She strapped swords to her body. When Susanoo arrived, he found his sister armed for battle, stamping her feet so hard that she sank thigh-deep into the ground, kicking up dirt like a warrior preparing to fight. "Why have you come?" she demanded. "Sister, I mean no harm. I only came to say goodbye before I descend to our mother in Yomi." "Liar, you've come to take my kingdom." "I swear I haven't. My heart is pure. Let me prove it." Amaterasu considered. "How?" "A contest. We will create gods. If my creations are male, it will prove my intentions are pure. If they are female, it will prove I came with dark purposes." Amaterasu agreed. Susanoo took Amaterasu's necklace, the sacred string of jewels their father had given her. He put the jewels in his mouth. He crunched them. He chewed them up. He spat out the fragments. And from his breath, from the mist of his exhalation, 5 male gods emerged. "See?" Susanoo said triumphantly. "Male gods. My heart is pure. I meant no harm. Amaterasu was not entirely convinced. Those gods came from my necklace, my sacred jewels. They belong to me. But Susanoo had technically won the contest. She couldn't accuse him of treachery now. She let him stay in heaven. This was a mistake. Almost immediately, Susanoo began to cause trouble. He broke down the ridges between the rice paddies that Amaterasu had carefully cultivated. The boundaries that separated the fields, that controlled the water flow, he smashed them. He filled in the irrigation ditches, the channels that brought water to the rice. He blocked them with dirt. He defecated in the sacred hall, the building where the first fruits were offered to the gods. He left his feces there. These weren't minor offenses. Rice was sacred. The rice paddies of heaven were a model for all agriculture on earth. The harvest rituals were essential to the cosmic order. Susanoo was attacking the foundations of civilization itself, but Amaterasu made excuses for him. He must be drunk, she told herself. He doesn't know what he's doing. He'll stop soon. He didn't stop. The final outrage happened in the weaving hall. Amaterasu was there with her maidens weaving the divine garments. Sacred work. Careful, delicate work. Susanoo climbed onto the roof of the hall. He tore a hole in the roof, and he threw a horse through it. Not just any horse. A heavenly piebald horse, a divine animal, and he had skinned it backwards, a technique used in some dark rituals. The hide was inside out. The body was mutilated. The bloody carcass crashed through the roof. It landed in the middle of the weaving hall. One of the maidens, some versions say the goddess Wakahirame, the young sun woman, was so shocked that she struck herself against her loom. The shuttle pierced her genitals. She died. In some versions, Amaterasu herself was injured. In others, she was unharmed, but witnessed the horror. In all versions, something inside Amaterasu broke. Amaterasu fled. She ran from the weaving hall. She ran from the blood. She ran from the horror of what her brother had done. She ran to a cave, the Ama-no-Iwato, the heavenly rock cave, a cavern in the mountains of heaven, a dark place, a place where she could hide from everything, from Susanoo, from the other gods, from the responsibility of being the sun. She went inside. The cave was deep, dark, the kind of darkness that felt solid, that pressed against you. Amaterasu went to the very back of that cave, as far from the entrance as she could get, and she sealed the entrance. She pulled a boulder across the mouth of the cave, a massive stone, the Ama-no-Iwato, the heavenly rock door. She dragged it into place with divine strength. She shut herself in. She refused to come out. And when Amaterasu hid, the sun disappeared. Think about what this means. Amaterasu wasn't just a goddess associated with the sun. She was the sun. Her light was the light that illuminated heaven and earth. Her warmth was what made life possible. When she hid, the sun literally vanished from the sky, not set, not eclipsed, gone. The world plunged into darkness, not the darkness of night, which is natural and expected, not the darkness of a cloudy day or a solar eclipse, an absolute darkness, a complete absence of light. In heaven, the high plain became black. The gods stumbled around, unable to see. The divine rice paddies, without sunlight, began to wither. On earth, Japan was plunged into eternal night. The people looked up and saw nothing. No sun, no warmth, no hope. The boundary between day and night, the fundamental rhythm of existence, collapsed. There was no more day. There was only endless, unchanging night. In the darkness, chaos reigned. The evil spirits came out. In Japanese cosmology, malevolent kami were held at bay by light. The sun's radiance kept them in their shadows, in their caves, in the dark places where they belonged. Without the sun, they had nothing to fear. They swarmed out, millions of them. Demons and malevolent spirits and hungry ghosts, and every dark thing that had been waiting for this moment. The myths describe the sound of them, like the buzzing of summer flies, an endless, droning, overwhelming noise, the sound of evil finally unleashed. They attacked humans, they attacked the gods, they brought disease and disaster and death. The crops couldn't grow. Plants need sunlight. Without it, they wither and die. The rice paddies that Amaterasu had tended so carefully, both in heaven and on earth, began to fail. The stalks turned yellow, then brown. The grain never formed. Famine spread. The humans who depended on agriculture, which was everyone, began to starve. Time itself became confused. How do you measure days when there is no day? How do you count time when the fundamental marker of time, the sun's journey across the sky, no longer exists? People didn't know when to sleep, when to wake, when to work, when to rest. The rhythm of life collapsed, and through all of this, Amaterasu sat in her cave. In the darkness she had chosen, alone, she could hear what was happening outside. She could hear the chaos, the suffering, the cries of the gods and humans alike. But she didn't come out. She had been violated. Her sacred space had been destroyed. Her maidens had been killed. Her brother had proven once and for all that she couldn't trust him, couldn't trust anyone. Why should she come out? Why should she shine for a world that contained Susanoo? Let them suffer. Let them deal with the consequences. She was done. The 800 myriad gods gathered. Yaoyorozu no Kami, the 8 million gods. This was a poetic number, not a literal count. It meant countless. It meant more than can be numbered. It meant every kami that had ever been born, from every lineage, from every realm. They assembled in the bed of the tranquil river of heaven, the Yasu no Kawara, the celestial river that flowed through paradise. Even the riverbed was a meeting place, a sacred space where decisions could be made. They gathered in the darkness. This was strange for gods. They were used to light. They were creatures of the heavens, where Amaterasu's radiance had always shone. Now they huddled in blackness, barely able to see each other. They needed to get Amaterasu out of that cave. But how? The goddess had sealed herself in. The boulder across the entrance was divine stone, placed by divine hands. Even gods couldn't simply move it. And even if they could move it, what then? Amaterasu didn't want to come out. She was traumatized, humiliated, done with the world that had treated her so badly. You can't force the sun to shine. You can't command light to exist. The sun has to choose to rise. How do you convince the sun to choose? They assigned the problem to the wisest among them. Omoikane no Kami, the god of wisdom and intelligence. His name meant serving thoughts, the deity who provides ideas, who solves unsolvable problems, who thinks what others cannot think. Omoikane sat in the darkness and pondered. He considered force. No, the boulder couldn't be moved from outside, and even if it could, a forced Amaterasu wouldn't truly shine. Light under compulsion isn't light. He considered persuasion. No, they had already begged her. The gods had called out to her, pleaded with her, explained how much the world needed her? She hadn't responded. Logical arguments wouldn't work. He considered waiting. No, the world was dying. The evil spirits were spreading. Every moment of darkness meant more destruction. They couldn't afford patience. He needed something else, something unexpected, something that would change the equation entirely. And then he had it. A plan so ridiculous that it might actually work. The plan had multiple parts, each one carefully designed. First, they gathered roosters, the yu, long crying birds of eternal night. Roosters crow at dawn. Their sound is associated with sunrise, with the return of light, with the breaking of night into day. In a world of eternal darkness, the roosters hadn't crowed. There was no dawn to announce. But the gods brought them to the cave. They set them to crowing, creating the sounds of morning even though morning couldn't come. Second, they forged a mirror, not an ordinary mirror, the greatest mirror ever created, the Yata no Kagami, the 8-span mirror. They assigned the work to Ishikoridome no Mikoto, the divine mirror maker. She took metals from heaven, copper, tin, the divine substances that existed in the celestial realm, and she worked them. She heated and hammered and polished. She poured her divine essence into the work. The mirror that emerged was perfect, flawless. It could reflect anything, any light, any truth, any reality. It would eventually become one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the sacred objects that legitimize the emperor's rule. That's how important this mirror was. Third, they created jewels, the Yasakani no Magatama, curved jewels like the ones Amaterasu already owned, comma-shaped beads made of jade or other precious stones. They strung together 500 of them, a magnificent necklace of divine jewelry. Fourth, they brought a sacred tree, the sakaki, an evergreen native to Japan, a tree that stayed green all year, that didn't lose its leaves in winter. A symbol of eternal life, of constancy, of the sacred. They uprooted a massive sakaki from the heavenly Mount Kagu. They carried it to the entrance of the cave. They decorated this tree with everything they had prepared. The mirror on its upper branches, the jewels on its middle branches, cloth offerings, white and blue, on its lower branches, a divine Christmas tree, a sacred object designed to attract divine attention, and one more God would have the most important role of all. Amno Uzume, the goddess of dawn, the goddess of mirth, the goddess of revelry. She climbed onto an overturned tub, a simple wash tub placed in front of the cave entrance. She stood on it like a stage, and she began to dance. At first, it was a normal dance, rhythmic, energetic, the kind of dance the gods performed at festivals. But as she danced, Ame no Uzume became possessed. Divine ecstasy filled her. The spirit of the dance took over. She stamped her feet. She whirled and spun. She threw herself into the performance with complete abandon. And then she started to strip. She loosened her clothes. She exposed her breasts. She pushed her skirt down, lower and lower, until she was essentially naked before all the assembled gods. She kept dancing. Wilder now, more ecstatic, more sexual. The 800 myriad gods watched, and they laughed. They roared with laughter, they howled, they clapped and cheered. The sound of their mirth echoed across the heavens. It was the first laughter in the endless night. Joy returning to a world that had forgotten what joy was. Inside the cave, Amaterasu heard. She heard the roosters crowing, but it couldn't be dawn. She was the dawn. She heard music and dancing, but the world was supposed to be in chaos. Who would be celebrating? And she heard laughter, 800 myriad gods laughing hysterically. Curiosity stirred within her. What was happening out there? She pushed the boulder slightly, just enough to create a crack, just enough to peer out. "Why are you laughing?" she called. "Why are you celebrating? The world is in darkness. I have withdrawn my light. Everything should be in mourning." Ame no Uzume answered, still dancing. "We celebrate because there is a goddess here more magnificent than you, a goddess whose light surpasses yours. We don't need you anymore." Amaterasu was shocked. More magnificent? Surpassing her? Impossible. She pushed the boulder further. She leaned out of the cave, and she saw herself, the mirror, the Yata no Kagami, positioned perfectly to catch her light, to reflect her own radiance back at her. She had never seen herself before. Gods don't have mirrors in their caves. She had never witnessed her own brilliance. She was transfixed. She leaned further out. She wanted to see more of this magnificent goddess. At that moment, a god stepped forward. Ame no Tajikarao, the heavenly hand-strength god, the strongest of the kami. He grabbed Amaterasu's hand. He pulled. He dragged her out of the cave before she could retreat. He yanked her into the open. And immediately, another god stretched a rope across the cave entrance. A shimenawa, a sacred boundary rope. "You may not go back in," the god declared. "This space is now forbidden." Amaterasu was out, and light returned to the world. The sun rose. After the endless night, dawn finally came. The darkness receded. The evil spirits fled back to their shadows. The crops could grow again. Life could resume. The cosmic order was restored. Amaterasu had returned. But there was still the matter of Susanoo. The 800 myriad gods deliberated. What should be done with the storm god? He had caused this catastrophe. He had driven the sun into hiding. He had killed a goddess with his violence. They demanded a penalty. Susanoo was fined 1,000 tables of offerings. His fingernails and toenails were pulled out. His beard was cut off. And he was expelled from heaven, cast down, banished, driven from the high plane of heaven forever. He descended to earth, to Japan, to the land his mother had created. And there, surprisingly, his story took a different turn. On earth, Susanoo changed. He arrived in the land of Izumo, in what is now Shimane Prefecture. He found a land terrorized by a monster, the Yamata no Orochi, the 8-forked serpent, a dragon with 8 heads and 8 tails, a beast so large that its body covered 8 valleys and 8 hills. Its eyes were red like winter cherries. Trees and moss grew on its back. It had ravaged Izumo for years, demanding the sacrifice of a young woman each year. Susanoo encountered a family weeping, an old couple and their one remaining daughter. 7 daughters had already been fed to the serpent. Now the 8th was about to be taken. The storm god, the wild one, the destroyer, the chaos bringer, looked at this suffering, and he offered to help. He transformed the girl into a comb. He hid her in his hair, keeping her safe. He had 8 vats of sake prepared, 8 gates built in a fence, the strongest rice wine, set out as a trap. The serpent came. It smelled the sake. Each of its 8 heads found a vat. It drank, and passed out drunk. Susanoo drew his sword. He attacked the unconscious monster. He hacked at its heads, its tails, its vast body. When he cut through the middle tail, his blade struck something hard. He reached in and found a sword. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword, one of the imperial regalia of Japan, hidden inside the serpent. Susanoo took the sword. He presented it to Amaterasu as a peace offering, an apology for everything he had done. She accepted it. The storm god married the girl he had saved. He built a palace in Izumo. He had children, grandchildren, descendants who would become important figures in Japanese mythology. The destroyer became a protector. The exile became a hero. But Amaterasu never fully trusted him again, and she never fully emerged from the shadow of what he had done to her. The goddess who had hidden in a cave remained in some way always capable of hiding again. The Sun Goddess, the Queen of Heaven, traumatized by her own brother. That was the nature of the gods. We've seen Yomi through Izanagi's eyes, the chase, the horror, the divorce at the border stone. But what was Yomi really? What did the Japanese believe happened to the dead? The answer is complicated and deeply unsettling. Yomi no Kuni, the land of Yomi. It lay beneath the earth. How far beneath, the myths don't say. Far enough that it took Izanagi significant time to reach it, far enough that it was completely dark. Yomi wasn't a place of judgment. The dead weren't sorted into good and bad, rewarded and punished. There was no weighing of hearts, no trial of souls, no cosmic justice determining your eternal fate. Yomi was simply where the dead went. All of them. Good people, bad people. Everyone who died ended up in Yomi, and what awaited them there? Decay. In Yomi, you kept your body. Not your living body, your dead body, your corpse. When Izanagi found Izanami, she wasn't a spirit or a ghost. She was her physical form, decomposing, maggots in her flesh, worms in her eyes, the thunder gods growing from her rot. This was the Japanese understanding of death. You didn't leave your body behind. You took it with you, and it continued to decay forever. Yomi wasn't a realm of peaceful rest. It wasn't a paradise of eternal reward. It was a vast darkness filled with rotting corpses, an endless graveyard where the dead existed in their decomposition. This is why the Japanese had such complex feelings about death and pollution. Kagar? Impurity. Death was the ultimate kagar. Anyone who touched a corpse, who attended a funeral, who even came near death was contaminated. They needed purification, ritual cleansing, time to return to a state of purity. This wasn't because the dead were evil. It was because death was a fundamental wrongness, a violation of the natural order, something that contaminated everything it touched. Izanagi had to wash himself in a river to remove the pollution of Yomi. Even a god couldn't escape the taint. Izanami ruled this realm. After the divorce, she declared herself Yomotsu Okami, the great god of Yomi, the ruler of all the dead. She was no longer the beautiful goddess who had danced around the pillar. She was a rotting corpse, commanding an army of rotting corpses, the queen of a kingdom of decay. And she was angry. Her curse stood, 1,000 deaths every day. She would kill that many of the living, adding them to her realm, expanding her kingdom. Every death in Japan was, in some sense, caused by Izanami. Every corpse that entered Yomi swelled her ranks. Every funeral was a victory for the queen of the dead. Yomi was separate from the world of the living. The boulder that Izanagi rolled across the entrance, the Chibiki no Iwa, became the permanent boundary, the border between life and death. But boundaries can be crossed. The Japanese believed that under certain circumstances, the dead could return, not as resurrected living people, as spirits, as ghosts. Yurei. Yurei were not the same as the dead in Yomi. When you died, your body went to Yomi, but your spirit, your rei, was supposed to move on, to become an ancestral spirit, to join the community of the dead who watched over their descendants. This was the proper progression of death, body to Yomi, spirit to ancestorhood. But sometimes it went wrong. Sometimes the spirit didn't move on. Sometimes it clung to the world of the living. Sometimes it couldn't rest. These were the yurei. There were several reasons a spirit might become a yurei. Improper burial. If the funeral rites weren't performed correctly, if the body wasn't treated with respect, the spirit couldn't transition properly. It was trapped. Sudden death. If someone died violently, unexpectedly, without time to prepare, in battle, by murder, in an accident, the shock could prevent the spirit from moving on. Strong emotions. If someone died with powerful feelings unresolved, grief, love, jealousy, rage, those emotions could anchor the spirit to the world. Unfinished business. If the person had something they needed to do, a task incomplete, a wrong unavenged, they might return to complete it. The classic image of the Japanese ghost is distinctive. White clothing, the white kimono of burial, the death shroud that corpses were dressed in for funerals. Long black hair, disheveled, hanging over the face, wild and untamed, no feet, or rather, feet that fade into nothing. Yurei float. They don't walk on the ground like living beings. Pale skin, deathly white, the color of corpses. This image became standardized in the Edo period, in kabuki theater and woodblock prints. But it drew on older beliefs. The dead were recognizable. They wore their burial clothes. They moved in ways that living humans didn't. The most dangerous type of yurei was the Onryō, the vengeful spirit. Onryō were ghosts driven by rage. They had been wronged in life, murdered, betrayed, abandoned, and they returned to exact revenge. They didn't just haunt. They killed. An Onryō could cause disease, could create disasters, could drive the living mad. They were forces of destruction, targeting not just the people who had wronged them, but often their entire families, their entire communities. The Japanese believed that Onryō were responsible for plagues, earthquakes, and other catastrophes. When disaster struck, one explanation was always that someone had created an Onryō through their cruelty. The most famous Onryō in Japanese culture is Oiwa, from the play Yotsuya Kaidan, written in 1825. But the story drew on older traditions. Oiwa was a beautiful woman, married to a ronin named Iemon. They were poor. Life was hard. But Oiwa loved her husband. Iemon didn't love her back. He had caught the eye of a wealthy woman, Uma. Her family was rich. If Iemon could marry her, all his financial problems would be solved. But he was already married to Oiwa, so Iemon devised a plan. He poisoned Oiwa, not a killing poison, not at first, a disfiguring poison, a substance that would destroy her beauty, make her repulsive, give him an excuse to abandon her. The poison worked. Oiwa's face swelled grotesquely. One eye drooped, nearly closed. Her skin erupted in sores. Her hair began to fall out in clumps. When she looked in a mirror and saw what she had become, she went mad with grief. She died. Some versions say she took her own life. Others say the poison finally killed her. Either way, Oiwa died disfigured, betrayed, knowing her husband had done this to her. And she came back. She appeared everywhere. Iemon married Umi. On his wedding night, when he lifted his new bride's veil, he saw Oiwa's face. her ruined, disfigured, vengeful face. He struck out with his sword. He killed Uma. But it was too late. Oiwa's ghost was already attached to him. She appeared in lanterns, her face emerging from the paper, leering at him. He would be walking at night, and a lantern would turn to reveal her single drooping eye. She appeared in mirrors. Every reflection became her face. She appeared in his dreams, in his waking hours, in every moment of every day. Aimon couldn't escape. He killed her father, thinking that was who was haunting him. Wrong. He killed his own mother, mistaking her for the ghost. Wrong. He killed his servants, his friends, anyone who came close. And still Oiwa was there, still watching, still waiting. In the end, Yaemon went completely mad. He had killed everyone around him. He had destroyed his own life trying to destroy her ghost. Only then did Oiwa allow him to die. Her vengeance was complete. Oiwa became the template for Japanese horror. Long black hair over a disfigured face. A woman wronged. A spirit that cannot rest until justice is done or vengeance is complete. The 2002 movie The Ring draws on this tradition. So does The Grudge, the pale woman, the dark hair, the implacable, unstoppable malevolence. These are all descendants of Oiwa, of the Onryō, of the wronged dead who will not rest. There were other famous Onryō. Okiku, a servant girl accused of losing a valuable plate. Her master tortured her, demanding she confess to something she hadn't done. He killed her and threw her body into a well. Now, Okiku's ghost rises from the well at night. She counts plates. 1, 2, 3, up to 9. Then she screams because the 10th plate is missing. The plate she was accused of losing? Oyuki, the snow woman, a beautiful woman in white who appears during snowstorms. She kills travelers who speak to her, freezing them with her icy breath. Otsuyu, a woman who died of love, unable to marry the man she wanted. Her ghost visited her beloved every night, and they would talk until dawn. But when someone revealed to him that she was dead, that he had been making love to a ghost, he died of shock. The dead don't rest easily in Japan. Beyond the Yurei, Japan was filled with yokai, supernatural creatures, spirits, monsters. The word yokai is hard to translate. It encompasses ghosts, demons, goblins, transformed animals, animated objects, nature spirits, and things that don't fit any category. The Japanese saw yokai everywhere. Every strange sound, every unexplained phenomenon, every eerie feeling in a dark forest. This was the work of yokai. They weren't gods exactly. They weren't human. They were something else. The strange things that lurked at the edges of perception. During the Edo period, yokai became a cultural obsession. Artists like Toriyama Sekien created encyclopedias of yokai. Hundreds of creatures, each carefully described and illustrated. Storytellers competed to tell the most frightening tales. They would gather in a room with 100 candles lit. Each person would tell a ghost story. After each story, one candle was extinguished. By the end, when all 100 candles were out, the room was in complete darkness. And the yokai, according to legend, would appear. Some yokai were malevolent. The oni, demons, large, brutish, often red or blue, with horns and fangs. They carried iron clubs. They lived in Jigoku, the Buddhist hell, where they punished the damned. But oni also wandered the earth. They were cannibals. They ate humans. They terrorized villages. They represented everything savage and brutal about existence. Yet Oni weren't entirely evil. They could be bargained with. They could be tricked. Sometimes they even married humans and had children. The relationship between humans and Oni was complicated. The Tengu, birdmen, mountain spirits. In early myths, Tengu were harbingers of war. Seeing a Tengu meant disaster was coming. They were crow-like demons who lived in the mountains and caused chaos. Later, their image changed. They became dangerous but not wholly malevolent. They were proud, easily offended, and incredibly skilled in martial arts. Legends say that the legendary warrior Yoshitsune learned his sword techniques from a Tengu. The creature lived on Mount Kurama and trained the boy in supernatural combat. But Tengu could also drive people mad. Their Tengu Kakushi, hidden by Tengu, was a phenomenon where people disappeared into the mountains, returning days or weeks later with no memory of what had happened. The Kappa, water spirits, they looked like humanoid turtles, or sometimes like children with green skin and webbed hands. They lived in rivers and ponds. They had shells on their backs and a depression in their skulls filled with water. That water was the source of their power. As long as it remained, a kappa was supernaturally strong. But if a kappa bowed, which they were compelled to do if you bowed to them first, the water would spill out, and they became weak. Kappa were dangerous. They drowned people. They dragged horses and cattle into rivers. They were particularly interested in a substance called shirikodama, a mythical ball that humans supposedly had inside their bodies. Kappa would pull this out, killing the victim. But Kappa could also be helpful. If you befriended one, perhaps by putting cucumbers in the river, their favorite food, they might assist you. They were excellent healers and knew secrets of medicine. Again, complicated. Neither wholly good nor wholly evil. Some yokai were mischievous. The tanuki, raccoon dogs, shapeshifters with a reputation for tricks and pranks. Tanuki could transform into anything. Monks, tea kettles, beautiful women, even entire buildings. They used these abilities mostly for fun. They enjoyed scaring people, playing tricks, stealing food. In artwork, tanuki are often depicted with enormous testicles. This isn't obscene. It's about their shape-shifting. They could stretch their scrotums to incredible sizes, using them as drums, as blankets, as fishing nets, as anything they needed. Tanuki represent the chaos of nature. The idea that the world is stranger and funnier than we think. The kitsune, foxes, perhaps the most famous yokai. Kitsune were shapeshifters, most often transforming into beautiful women. They could live for centuries, growing more powerful with age. The number of tails a kitsune had indicated its power. The most powerful had 9. Some kitsune were malicious. They possessed humans, driving them mad. They seduced men, then revealed their true nature at the worst moment. They were tricksters and deceivers. But other kitsune were benevolent. They served as messengers of Inari, the god of rice and prosperity. Shrines to Inari are guarded by fox statues. These kitsune protected rather than harmed. The most famous kitsune story is about a man who fell in love with a woman who turned out to be a fox. They married. They had children. They were happy. Then one day a dog frightened her. She transformed into a fox and fled. The man searched for her. He found her and begged her to return. She couldn't. Once her nature was revealed, she had to leave the human world. But she still loved him. She visited in dreams. She watched over their children. a yokai love story. Not all supernatural beings are enemies. Some yokai were simply strange. The Nopperabo, faceless ghosts. They looked like normal humans until they turned around. Where their face should be, there was nothing, just smooth, blank skin. The Nopperabo didn't kill people, they just scared them. That was their purpose. That was their nature. They existed to frighten, nothing more. The Rokurokubi, women whose necks stretched impossibly long at night while they slept. Sometimes their heads would detach entirely, flying around the room while their body lay sleeping. Most Rokurokubi didn't know what they were. They lived normal lives by day. Only at night did their true nature emerge. The Tsukumogami, objects that had become yokai. The Japanese believed that anything that existed for 100 years could gain a spirit, could become aware, could become a yokai. An umbrella that had been used for a century might become a kasa obake, an umbrella ghost with one eye and one leg. A tea kettle might become a bunbuku chagama, hopping around, growing fur, playing tricks. Old sandals, old lanterns, old musical instruments, all could transform into tsukumogami. This created an interesting moral imperative. Take care of your possessions, repair them when they break. Don't discard them carelessly, because if you mistreat your things and they become tsukumogami, they will remember, and they might take revenge. The Japanese saw the boundary between the human world and the spirit world as thin, much thinner than in Western mythology. Spirits were everywhere, in the mountains, in the rivers, in the forests, in the sea, in your house, in your possessions, and they could cross into human awareness at any moment. Twilight was especially dangerous, the hour between day and night. The Japanese called it omagatoki, the time of meeting evil spirits. The moment when the boundary was thinnest. So was New Year's, the turning of the year, the point where time itself was liminal. And so was the Obon festival, the time when the dead returned. Every August, or July in some regions, the Japanese celebrated Obon, the festival of the dead, the time when ancestral spirits came home. For 3 days, the spirits of deceased family members returned to the world of the living. They visited their former homes. They spent time with their descendants. This wasn't haunting. It was homecoming. Families would clean their houses. They would set up special altars with offerings of food and drink. They would light mukebi, welcome fires, to guide the spirits home. They would place small offerings at the altar, rice, vegetables, fruit, sweets. The spirits didn't actually eat, but they appreciated the gesture. They consumed the essence of the food, the intention behind it. At the end of Obon, they lit okuribi, send-off fires, to guide the spirits back. Some families make small boats out of paper or straw. They place candles inside. They write the names of their dead on the boats. They carry the boats to a river or the sea. They light the candles. They set the boats floating on the water. Hundreds of tiny boats, thousands, each one carrying a candle, each one bearing a name, drifting downstream, floating out to sea, carrying the spirits back to the other world. In some regions, they do it bigger. In Kyoto, during the Gozan no Okuribi, they light enormous fires on 5 mountains surrounding the city. The most famous forms the character da-o-die, meaning great or large, blazing on the mountainside. 75 points of fire, forming a single character visible across the entire city. A signal to all the spirits at once. It's time to go home. The fire burns for about 30 minutes. Then it fades. The spirits have departed. The living remain. Until next year. The Japanese relationship with death is different from Western cultures. Death isn't a wall, it's a veil. The dead don't disappear to some infinitely distant realm, never to be heard from again. They're still here, still connected, still part of the family. They exist in Yomi, yes. Their bodies decay in Izanami's kingdom, but their spirits, their presence, their love, their continuing interest in the living, these remain tied to the world above. Ancestor worship is central to Japanese religion. Every home has, or traditionally had, a butsudan, a household shrine. Usually a cabinet with doors that open to reveal an interior decorated with Buddhist images, memorial tablets, and offerings. The tablets are the ihai. Each one bears the posthumous Buddhist name of a deceased family member. Each one represents a spirit that is being honored. Every day, or at least regularly, families make offerings at the butsudan. Rice, fruit, water, incense. Small gestures of respect and remembrance. They ring a small bell. They put their hands together in prayer. They speak to the ancestors. Good morning, grandmother. We're doing well, grandfather. Please watch over us. The ancestors respond, not with words, but with presence. A feeling of peace when you pray at the butsudan. A sense that someone is watching over you. Good fortune that seems to come at the right moment. The Japanese don't expect the dead to perform miracles. They don't pray to ancestors for wealth or success the way some cultures pray to gods. They pray for guidance, for protection, for the comfort of knowing that death doesn't sever the bond of family. And the ancestors provide. There's a phrase in Japanese, senso kuyo. Ancestor memorial service. It's not just ritual. It's relationship maintenance. You honor the ancestors because they are still your family, because they still care about you, because the relationship didn't end when they died. You make offerings because you would feed any family member who visited your home. You speak to them because you would speak to any relative. You remember their birthdays and death anniversaries because those dates still matter. The dead are not past. The dead are present, just in a different way. Japanese mythology contains genuine horror. Izanami rotting in Yomi, maggots in her eyes, thunder gods growing from her corpse, the Onryō tearing apart the living, Oiwa's distorted face appearing in every lantern, every mirror, driving her murderer to destroy everything he loved. The Yurei who will not rest, the Yokai lurking at every boundary, the Tsukumogami plotting revenge for centuries of neglect. This is a world where death is present, where the dead can reach back, where the boundary is thin enough to be dangerous. But it also contains hope. The dead aren't gone. They're still there, still watching, still caring. You can honor them. You can maintain the relationship. You can welcome them home once a year and send them back with love. Death isn't the end. It's a transformation, a change in address. The dead go to Yomi. Their spirits become ancestors. Their bodies decay, but their love remains. And once a year, they come home. These were the Japanese myths of death. Izanami and Izanagi, the divine couple who created Japan and destroyed their marriage, who loved so deeply that Izanagi descended to the underworld for his wife, who found that some boundaries should not be crossed, that some things, once seen, can never be unseen, that love itself can curdle into hatred when shame enters the picture. Izanami became death. Not a gentle death, not a peaceful passing, a rotting, maggot-ridden, furious death that pursues the living with cold fingers and thousand-fold curses. And yet, she was once a creator. She gave birth to Japan. She made the islands with her body. The same goddess who formed the archipelago became the queen of decay. That's the horror and the tragedy of it. The mother became the destroyer. The lover became the enemy. The most intimate relationship possible became the source of eternal enmity. Amaterasu, the sun goddess who was so wounded by her brother's violence that she hid herself from the world. Think about what this story tells us about trauma. The most powerful being in the cosmos, the sun itself, was so hurt that she withdrew. She said, "I will not shine for a world that contains this cruelty. I will not illuminate a universe where this can happen." And the world almost ended because of it. It took the combined efforts of 800 myriad gods to bring her back. It took trickery and comedy and sacred objects. It took a striptease and uproarious laughter. But they did bring her back. The light returned. Trauma doesn't have to be permanent. Withdrawal doesn't have to be forever. Even the sun, hidden in the darkest cave, can be coaxed back into the sky. And Yomi, the land of the dead. Not a place of judgment or reward, not a heaven for the virtuous or a hell for the wicked. Just death. The reality of it. Bodies decomposing in darkness. The physical facts of what happens when life ends. The Japanese didn't romanticize death. They didn't pretend it was peaceful. They didn't imagine the dead as spirits floating into clouds, playing harps, enjoying eternal rest. They saw death for what it was. Bodies rotting, flesh falling from bones, the horror of decay. But they also didn't let death defeat them. They maintained relationships with their dead. They honored ancestors. They welcomed spirits home during Obon. They kept the connection alive even after life ended. Death was terrifying. The underworld was a nightmare. But it wasn't the end of love. We've traveled now through 4 mythologies. The Greeks, with their monstrous gods and powerless mortals. Where death was a shadow realm called Hades, where souls drifted as pale shades of their former selves, forgetting who they had been. The Norse, with their doomed gods and inevitable apocalypse, where death could mean Valhalla's glory or hell's cold realm, but where everyone knew that even the gods would die at Ragnarok. The Egyptians, with their cosmic bureaucracy and earned eternity, where death was a test, where your heart was weighed, where proper preparation could earn you passage to the field of reeds. And the Japanese, with their rotting underworld and returning spirits, where death was both horror and homecoming, where the dead decayed but also came back to visit, where the boundary between worlds was thin enough to cross. Each culture looked at death and saw something different. The Greeks saw powerlessness. The gods did what they wanted. Mortals suffered. Death was just another way the universe expressed its indifference to human wishes. The Norse saw fate. Everything was written. The world would end. The gods would fall. The only question was how you faced the inevitable, with courage or with cowardice. The Egyptians saw judgment. Death was a test. Your life was measured. The scales didn't lie. You got what you deserved. The Japanese saw continuation. The dead didn't go away. They stayed connected. They came home. Death transformed relationships but didn't end them. None of them were wrong. Death is all of these things. It's powerless. We can't stop it. No amount of wealth or wisdom or strength can keep death away forever. It's fated. It comes for everyone, king and peasant, god and mortal. The timing varies, but the destination is the same. It's a judgment. Not literally, perhaps. No scales wait for us. But how we lived echoes after us. We're remembered or forgotten based on who we were. And it's a continuation. The dead remain with us, in memory, in influence, in the ways they shaped us and the world. They're gone, but they're not absent. The old myths understood death better than we do. We hide from it. We sanitize it. We put it in hospitals and funeral homes and pretend it doesn't exist. We don't talk about it. We don't think about it. We act as if ignoring death will make it go away. It won't. The Japanese knew this. They built death into their religion. They told stories about Izanami's rotting body. They depicted Yurei and Onryō in their art. They created festivals where the dead came home. They faced death. They incorporated it. They made it part of life. And maybe that's healthier than what we do. Izanami is still in Yomi, still counting her 1,000 deaths per day, still ruling her kingdom of decay, still waiting for each of us to join her. But once a year, the boundary opens. The spirits cross over. They visit their families. They sit at tables where places are set for them. They're welcomed home, and then they go back. The lanterns float down the rivers. The fires blaze on the mountains. The living wave goodbye. Until next year. Until next time. Until the boundary opens again. There are more stories to tell. Celtic warriors crossing to the other world, where the dead feast in halls of eternal plenty. Mesopotamian gods descending to realms of dust and silence, where even the greatest kings become shadows. African spirits who never quite leave, who remain in the trees and rivers and winds of their homeland. Hindu cycles of death and rebirth, where the soul returns again and again until it achieves liberation. Aztec journeys through 9 levels of the underworld, taking 4 years to complete. Polynesian voyages to spirit islands beyond the horizon. Every culture has stared into the darkness and seen something. Every people has told stories about what waits on the other side. The old myths are waiting. They've been waiting for thousands of years, and they'll be here whenever you're ready. Until next time, sleep well. And if you hear something moving in the darkness tonight, it's probably just the wind. Probably.